Joining us today. My name is Bianca Bricciu, and I'm an assistant professor in the School of Leadership, Ecology, and Equity. We start this interview with a territorial acknowledgement. Kwe Kakina, hello everyone. Pijashig, welcome. We would like to acknowledge that St. Paul University is located on the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe people. We would like to honor the Anishinaabe, the first peoples of the lands and waters of the Kichisibi from time immemorial. We acknowledge that the site of the city of Ottawa serves as the home of the Anishinaabe as a place for spiritual ceremonies, cultural gatherings, and exchanges among First Peoples. Today, the spirit of peace and friendship is the foundation of relationships among Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples from around the globe. So I would like to present the series, Being a Leader, Lunchtime Conversations. This series offers opportunities to reflect with organizational and community leaders around the challenges of social transformation in a complex world and to better appreciate the resources we can rely on to act within this world. It is organized by the School of Leadership, Ecology and Equity at St. Paul University. And Gabrielle will share with you more information in the chat about the school and the programs that we have. A few reminders before we start. This conversation is recorded and will be added to our YouTube channel. We will be sending out the link after the event. We invite you to keep your webcam open. Only the videos of those speaking will be shared. And please don't hesitate to send your questions or reflections throughout the conversation using the chat. We will have some time for questions and answers following the conversation with our invited leader today. And now it's my pleasure to invite my colleague Heather Eaton to present our speaker, Maude Barlow, for this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, Bianca, and welcome everyone. It's so nice to see friends and faces of people I know. I'm so glad you came. It is truly my honor and pleasure to introduce Maude Barlow. Maude is an extraordinary Canadian activist. You just have to bear with me while I read you some details about her life because it's long and extensive what she has done. Maude has been chairs the Washington-based Food and Water Watch. She is the founder of the Blue Planet Project. Maude co-founded the Council of Canadians, and all of you who've worked on boards, Maude did this for 3 decades. The Council of Canadians, Maude, you should just deserve a prize just for that. Amazing. Serves on the board of advisors of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, a former counselor with the Hamburg-based World Future Council. Maude has served as the chancellor of Brescia University College in London, which is the last all-women's university in Canada. Maude has been the recipient, get ready for this, 17 honorary doctorates, 17 honorary doctorates, many other awards. The 2005 Right Livelihood Award, I'm sure some of you remember that, for the book Blue Gold, this is the alternative Nobel Peace Prize that Maude won. The Lifetime Achievement Award, the Canadian Environmental Award, the Earth Day Canadian Outstanding Environmental Achievement Award, Planet in Focus Eco Hero Award, and the Earth Care Award. Maude has served as senior advisor on water to the President of the United States, not the current one. We won't talk about him today. She is the creator of the Blue Communities Project. And just one thing about this, that is more than 25 million people around the world are now involved in the Blue Communities Project. That's really something, Maude. Blue community towns, Paris, Berlin, Brussels, Thessalonica, Los Angeles, Vancouver, Montreal. St. Paul University, we received, I guess, the Blue Community Award last year. And the last thing I'll say is Maude is the author of dozens of reports, over 20 books, including Blue Gold, but a beautiful book called Still Hopeful, Lessons from a Lifetime of Activism in 2022. And while we were just beginning the conversation, Maude said she's writing another book. So we are delighted you're with us, Maude. It's such a pleasure and an honor. And the first thing is welcome to our conversation.
Well, Heather and Bianca, thank you so, so much. I'm embarrassed and knocked out by that gorgeous introduction. Thank you so much. And hello to everybody out in the world who's joining us on this call today. I'm delighted to be here.
So I sent Maude a few questions, which are just conversation starters. So we will talk till about 20 to quarter to 1, and then we'll have a Q&A. So I asked Maude to say 3 things about herself that she would like that are not on her CV. So that's your first question.
All righty, Heather, thank you so much. Well, the first, I got thinking family, because you don't put so much about your family in a short CV. My mom and my dad were my all-time heroes. They were lovely, lovely people. My mother was a full-time homemaker. She lost her first husband in the Second World War. He was shot down over the Battle of Britain. And she was pregnant by the time they found out that he'd been killed, and she moved back with her parents who lived in St. John, New Brunswick. My own dad came from a community near there, Pointe du Chien, and he saw 5 very hard years in the war. He came back absolutely determined to build what he called a social nation state. He was one of the wonderful people. They were among the wonderful people who built what we have in Canada today. And he went on to create the criminology, the whole concept of criminology. He helped set up the department at Ottawa U, in fact. And he was the leader in the campaign to get capital and corporal punishment ended in Canada. He wrote a book called Should Canada Abolish the Gallows and the Lash in 1955. So I come from good stock. He was at the last execution in Canada. It was 1960. It was a double one at the Don jail, and he had a placard, a protest, So I grew up with my oatmeal in the morning. I was told you owe something back. That was something that came to my mind. And the second thing was my grandkids. I have 4 fabulous young adult grandchildren whom I adore, one of whom is taking her master's at Guelph in all of the work that I do. And the other day we were sitting having a conversation about a book I'm writing on the financialization of nature. And if you get me started, I'll never talk about anything else, so I won't go over there, but it's really important stuff, right? And there's my granddaughter said, well, I've got an assignment on the commodification of the environment. And I said, okay, same thing, sweetie. So that's just a pure piece of joy. And the third thing is, we were just talking about the fact that a lovely big happy dog decided to knock me down in a park a couple of weeks ago, and just to play, but it knocked me right over like a rag doll, and my ankle was badly sprained, and I went into husband and I went to the emergency. And I remember that the last time I'd been there was 2 years before for another dog that did bite me. So I love dogs, but I like everybody look after your dogs. But I'm delighted to be here. Those are 3 things you won't see in my CV.
Lovely, except for the dog and breaking your ankle. That's very difficult. It's very heartwarming that your grandchildren.
It came like this at me. Great, big, beautiful dog. It's like, oh, you look like you'd like to roll in the snow with me. Ba-doom, right? And the owners were like, oh, little, Fluffy never does this. Yeah, right. Put your dog on a leash. Anyway, I'm fine. I'm walking again.
And writing your book.
And writing my book on the financialization of nature. It's called.
We shall get to that.
All right. See, I told you if you get me started.
So our topic for our this lunch hour, Being a Leader series, is about leadership. And you have many different kinds of leadership experiences. I mean, all different kinds. I'm curious what you would say. How did you learn to be such a good leader? Challenging question, but how would you learn to be such a good leader? Because you have such an incredible track record as a good leader.
Well, I thank you for that. I don't know that I could say what it means to be a good leader, because you just do these things kind of by instinct. There wasn't anything when I was going to university that taught me the kinds of things that I would want to know for the career I had.
Oh, interesting.
I think that's not true now. There's
Ah,
like people like you are teaching, about movements and about democracy and about social justice and all of that. But there was none of that when I was going to university. It was
mm,
history and social studies and English literature and mathematics. It was
right.
just which was fine. It was all important. But I didn't learn anything that I did with my life from that formal education. So it was kind of as I went along, but I learned that I had to listen. You can't hurry the process of building an organization, of building a movement, of building people together. You have to take the time. And so listening to other people and in building the Council of Canadians, we had no money. This is when Ronald Reagan was president and Brian Mulroney was prime minister, and they decided to enter into this free trade agreement. And thank you very much. Aren't we paying for it today? That put all of our economic, not just our exports, but really harmonized our economy to
All
that of the
right.
United States in a way that we predicted then could be a problem if we ever had an unfriendly American leader. But I would be invited, say, to speak at a teachers' convention because I did a lot of work in the women's movement, say in, I don't know, Red Deer, Alberta. And while I was there, I would set up a chapter of this Council of Canadians kind of thing. And so it was really,
Uh-huh.
it was just being with people, building. And what Ursula Franklin, the late Ursula Franklin, wonderful Canadian scientist and peace advocate, she used to call, you have to have a standpoint. And I've loved this language. It doesn't mean that you're stubborn and you can never learn anything and that you can't change your mind if you're wrong, but that you have place that you've put your values down in, like in the ground, this is who I am and I'm not for turning. And people knowing that you're going to be just and fair, I think is extremely important. And you have to put your trust in people, and that can break your heart because they can obviously, not live up to what you might have hoped. But you have to do it anyway. You have to get over that initial kind of, well, I've been hurt, so I don't want to try again. You just have to open yourself to the world. And when the criticism comes, if it's valid, hear it. If it's not, block it. Let it go over your head like water over a duck's head because you're just going to get lost in the hurt that brings. But being a leader is truly about pulling the best out of other people. It's extraordinarily important, as I'm sure you know, Heather, in your work.
I like what you just said about you're pulling the best out of people. You're inviting them to be their best when you're a leader. That's very important insight. I have another question of what have you found to be the most rewarding experiences? And then, of course, the challenging ones. But as a leader,
Well, rewarding, I guess, the fight for the human right to water was if I had to say, the crowning event of my life was standing in the United Nations General Assembly balcony in New York City on July 10th, 2010. So, sorry, July 28th, 2010. And watching the General Assembly of the United Nations vote in favor of water and sanitation as basic human rights. Now, you may say, well, my heavens, that's just a motherhood. Of course, they're human rights, but it was a huge fight, Heather. It was a huge fight. It was not, the right to water was not included in the 1948 Declaration of Human Rights because it wasn't seen as an issue then. But through the 80s and 90s, and then the first part of the century, it became very, very clear that the greatest human rights violation in the world, if you look at sheer numbers, and particularly women and children, was the lack of clean water and sanitation. And we needed to say it's not a need that can be fulfilled by charity. It is a basic fundamental human right, and that's different. And we fought really hard. A lot of the big countries were against us. Canada, under Stephen Harper, opposed. They led the opposition against the human right to water at the UN because they knew at the time we had so many of the First Nations communities without decent drinking water or sanitation, and they knew that we would use this as a tool. But they were awful. They would get up, if I would speak at a panel or whatever, the Canadian delegation would get up and walk out, but they'd always brought bottled water, you know, their smart water, stick it right there where I could see it. Um, but, and I thought we were going to lose that day because the big water companies were opposed, the big food companies were opposed, the big bottled water industry was opposed. But we won. Something like 142 countries voted in favor, 41 abstained, and that Canada abstained. Not even Canada voted against. They didn't want that on their record. But, and I can remember standing in the balcony with the Pablo Sonov, the ambassador from Bolivia, who had put the question to the General Assembly, and you know, some of them are going like this to him, and he's smiling at them with this big shit-eating grin for his, pardon me, but he did. I was like, what part of we just won and you didn't, do you not get here? It was huge, Heather, because we still in this world have a crisis on water. It's a dual crisis. It's human and it's ecological. We are a planet running out of clean water. The United Nations says that within 10 years, the demand will outstrip supply by 40%, which is a stunning, stunning statistic. And one quarter of the population of the world today doesn't have access to clean drinking water, and one half doesn't have access to sanitation, proper sanitation. And when we went through COVID, everybody said, well, wash your hands with soap and warm water. Well, where are you to do that if your school or your home or your business or your place of work doesn't have any, not even the health clinic has running water. So it has been the fight of my life, and it's taken me to every part of the world. I've been from the slums, you know, in Delhi and Chile and, you know, the worst places, to, you know, the heads of state, to the United Nations and so on, fighting for this vision that every person has the fundamental human right to water, and that we can and must do this, and it must be maintained as a public trust, not just the human right to be delivered by private companies making money. No, that this is a public trust and must be held under democratic governance. And just to say, in addition, quick addition, is that meeting people around the world who are fighting this fight in their communities has been the most exciting and joyous part of this. You get off a plane or a train and you're met with people you've never met before, right? And you love them. And there immediately you have this bond because there's something about water. You can, you know, take this away and come in and take the copper or the gold out of the land, or you came in and you know, cut down those trees, and all of that's terrible, but you touch my water, and that's my life. And we had a water war in Cochabamba, Bolivia, in the late 1990s, and people were killed. The army was brought out to quell this revolution, water revolution. And the man who led it was a shoemaker who'd never stepped outside of Bolivia in his life. And I said, where did you get the courage to take on the World Bank and your own government and the army? And he said, and I'll never forget this, he said, because I would rather die of a bullet than thirst. I don't think we understand what life is like when those are the choices that you're faced with. So being part of that fight has been truly the honor of my life.
This is where the Cochabamba Declaration came from, I believe.
That was a little later. So then
Okay.
10 years, almost 10 years later, we all gathered in 2009 in Copenhagen for the one of the climate summits, and it was a terrible failure, and it was also violent. The security from all over Europe came to just stomp on people. It was really quite terrible. It was when you got off the plane in Copenhagen. This is for the climate summit. Little pretty young people, mostly young women, all dressed in red, would hand you little Coca-Cola cups and welcome you to Copenhagen. They called it Copenhagen. I started calling it Copenhagen. You know,
Oh
Coca-Cola.
my.
Coca-Cola is bringing you the climate summit. All these summits are brought to you by these corporations, right? Then it was a terrible failure. So several months later, early into the next year, the government of the then different government in Bolivia invited the movement to come to Cochabamba and to write the declaration that should have come out of Copenhagen. And I was there for that. It was very moving.
Nice.
And that was when we started to found the Global Alliance on the Rights of Nature, which is something I've been deeply involved in. And if anybody wants to know more, just go on the website, GARN, the Global Alliance on the Rights of Nature. Very exciting. Where we have rivers in Canada now that are being protected. The Magpie River in northern Quebec has now been declared to have legal personhood, legal rights, to flow, to be, healthy. It even has the right to sue governments and corporations if, if it is violated. And of course, the local Innu people are the guardians of the river. But we've got right here in Ottawa, the Gatineau. There's First Nations here and others are working towards having the Gatineau declared to have legal rights. The Dene in northern Alberta are doing the same with the Athabasca. So this is a very exciting movement that did, in fact, start, as you say, good for you, in Cochabamba, and just after the failure of that bad Copenhagen experience.
So tell us a little bit about what you have found challenging in your various leadership roles, because you must have had some challenges, some things that didn't work out. Anything you want to say? It's up to you.
I think the thing that challenges progressive movements, and it's ever thus, is sometimes we don't work as well together as we should. And that's hard because you get the different realities of different rights that people are demanding, and rightfully demanding. I'm not arguing that at all, but those can then conflict with another group, obviously, or they can conflict with the concept of doing something larger together. And sometimes I have felt that on progressive movements, we form a great big circle and shoot in. We shoot inward, and we sometimes don't always put the greater good or stop and understand and try to really hear what somebody else is saying. And I've tried to deal with this around the issues of racism, gender issues, any leader, and I don't see myself as a leader. I see myself as, being passionate, and therefore I'm out there, sort of thing. But people who find themselves in roles of leadership have to find ways to do this. And it's never going to just work itself out. You're always going to have this. This is the changing nature of our social reality. But it's finding a way to honor the demands of the different groups in the reality from which they come, but bringing them together and that reality into the larger framework. And I'm interested, and I know one of your last questions is about the current moment, and we can come back to this, but I think you're going to find some of that's going to happen now with the Trump threat against Canada.
Please feel free to talk about this now. The questions don't have to be in order. So,
well, I mean, I just think that we're seeing people coming together and saying our differences aren't as big as what brings us together, when suddenly not only is this guy saying 25 percent tariffs, that's the small thing. What he's really saying is, if you want to get around that, I'm dead serious. I want you and your resources, and I want you as a 51st state. And I'm warning us right now, water is going to be on the table. We're forming a group, network of organizations working on water to come together to be prepared for this. I think we're going to do a poll on it, because we really have to be prepared for this coming at it. And there will be certain interests in Canada, perhaps business interests, perhaps people may more on the conservative side, who are going to say it's a bargaining chip. You even have Chrétien a couple of years ago saying, well, it's renewable. Why not, why not sell it? What are we holding on to? And understanding that, first of all, we are a country in drought. I look out the window and I'm seeing snow, so it's hard to realize that. But if you look at the drought map, and it's on the Government of Canada website, we're still 60-some% in drought. We're even now, and in the summer, it's very high. We do not have water to spare. And to start the commercial export of water would mean we would completely lose control of it. But I warn us, I think that's coming. And I also think that the Northern Passageway, the Northwest Territories, is what Trump's got his eye on. As climate change warms the atmosphere. The ice is melting. The tundra is melting. There are enormous riches up there, and he knows it. The Russians know it. The Chinese know it, and that's why he wants Greenland as well. So he's not. He may be a bad person, but he's not stupid. And I know what he wants. This is manifest destiny. So we need to. So going back to the question about coming together, the progressive forces have to come together to articulate what we want. We don't want to give Trump absolutely everything he wants: militarization of the border and access to our resources, and build another energy east pipeline from Hardisty, Alberta to New Brunswick, which I fought tooth and nail 10 years ago when it was happening. And we did a study called When Oil Meets Water that showed that oil pipeline carrying the bitumen from laced with chemicals from Hardisty, Alberta, in 60-year-old pipes in some places, would go under something like it was 1,300, or go over or under 1,300 waterways, including the St. Lawrence River. I mean, the potential for a huge oil crisis, or many oil crises spills, was great, and we stopped it. So we need to articulate what our vision for this country is: not a narrow-minded nationalism, not that kind of thing, but really, truly, what is it that those of us on the progressive side, if you will, what is our vision for what needs to happen? And I think there's a lot of conversations going on. There's a lot of really wonderful sharing going on. There's a number of us who were part of that group back in the 1980s that launched the first fight against the first free trade agreement, who've come back together we're a little grayer, but we are sharing our thoughts and advice to younger people who are making political decisions on this.
I did see yesterday, so I'm sure you're aware, as many are here, the buy in Canada, buy Canadian products, but one of the ads I saw yesterday was also the pipeline. So we should have pipelines across Canada that are Canadian, and I was quite shocked to see that.
Oh yeah, you're going to hear a lot of that. Now, I don't know if you saw, about 2 weeks ago, Chief Stuart Phillip, who's the Grand Chief of the First Nations chiefs in British Columbia, who fought the Northern Gateway pipeline. That's the one that would have been more north than the one that they built. And he fought them both and lost one, but won the other. He said about 2 weeks ago, because of Trump, we're going to have to open those gateways up again. And he said, I will now support the Northern Gateway pipeline. Well, the next day he said, "Whoops, I retracted," because I think his colleagues got to him and said, "What are you talking about? This, just because people don't want to talk about climate change doesn't mean it isn't here anymore."
Absolutely.
And you're going to get everybody dropping the pricing, the carbon tax. And everybody wants to put the whole discussion on the back burner while we come together. And that's what I meant when I said, Heather, that we need to come together with the vision of what we want, and putting the issues of justice, equality, and environmental responsibility. I don't like the word stewardship, because it's more than that. We can't sacrifice the environment to stand up to the United States. We said this 40 years ago. Like, I want to take a full page ad in the Globe and Mail and say, "We told you so." We said we will go back to being hewers of water, drawers of water, and hewers of wood. And do you know that in the 1970s, about 26% of our GDP was manufacturing? Or put it another way, manufacturing accounted for about 26% of our GDP. Do you know that it's under 10% now?
Oh,
that's what free trade does. Free trade basically says you can't unilaterally say those logs or that fish or whatever has to be processed in your country before it's exported. The agreement is free trade. Let the corporations and the market decide. And so steadily, our manufacturing was lost. We lost, thousands of jobs in the auto sector, thousands of jobs in branch plants of American companies that just closed up. And my very first book, called Parcel of Rogues, which was about the Mulroney and the people in the business community that sold out Canada, it was based on a Rabbie Burns' poem about the Scottish steel we could disdain, but British gold we could disdain, but British steel we could disdain, but British gold has been our bane. Oh, what a parcel of rogues in a nation. That was Rabbie Burns, or, others saying this is, the rogues are the ones who sold out. So we really do, I think you're going to find that we're are going to be talking about coming together as a country. Buy Canadian, think Canadian, don't take your holidays wherever, whatever, But there are going to be very different visions for how we stay alive. And I think the Energy East pipeline, and I think selling our water and precious minerals, lithium, opening up the north to unregulated exploration. We got to really be careful that we don't say, which Trump is saying, to hell with the environment. If he finds an environmental rule that he hasn't overturned, he overturns it just because it's there. He hasn't, like he's totally deregulating. He's saying to the businesses of the world, you want to do business with us and not be taxed, come here, settle here, pay your taxes here, create jobs here. That's what he's saying. That's his goal.
I want to ask some questions, or I would like you to speak about. So since we need to come together as Canadians, I think we need a progressive movement on the left. I agree with you that the progressive movements on the left or the analysis on the left can be fragmented at times. I'm interested in your views of young people. How can we have this multi-generational approach to these issues? So we need to come together. What would be your tips of how to make this multi-generational, diverse and strong, and also united in this vision that I would agree we really need to have? But I'm also, because we work with young people, where can they fit? And
of course. And of course, we know that some young people will take a very different path. I mean, the press secretary to Donald Trump is 27 years old, and oh my heavens, she's so sure she's right on everything. It's kind of scary. So it's not that all young people are going to be sharing the values that you and I share, Heather, but we do need to find a place to come together, and we're building that. I feel that a lot of that's been lost in the last few years. And I wrote about it in my book on hope, about building a movement and the steps to build a movement. One of them is to take the time it needs. You don't hurry it, though personal relationships are extraordinarily important. It's long drives or long train rides or long plane rides to long meetings with coffee till your head explodes, but getting to know people and getting to hear them and building trust is so important. You have to agree on a mandate. You have to be sure you don't hurry over that. People say, well, I never agreed to that. That's not my vision at all. Take the time you need to do that. Craft a clear message. Pierre Poilievre knows that. Unfortunately for him, it's gone. So he's looking for another one. But, craft a message that people can hear. Set clear goals. You have to build an alternative vision. When I was with the council, we would never, ever put out any analysis without saying, here's the alternative. Anything we were doing, here's the problem, here's what you can do, and here's what we need. It would never just have the first part with the criticism, because that makes people feel, helpless. You always have to do, and these are the steps, and people feel good because they can do something. It might be something pretty simple, but everything matters. And then what's our vision? What's the alternative that we put out there? And I think to speak to young people about that is extraordinarily important. We need to build bridges. We need to serve the grassroots. And this is something I spend a fair amount of time on in the book on hope, and that is the need to be kind. To be kind to one another and to be kind to yourself, and to know when you've kind of pushed too hard to yourself or to others. And I think we need to build into movements like the labor movement, like justice movements, racial justice movements, climate justice movements. We need to build in the notion of finding ways to support each other. I read a book, I'm going to forget the title. They were two psychiatrists who wrote about in our world, in our Western culture, kindness is seen as weakness. You're allowed to be kind to your kids and your spouse, I guess, but your kindness out in the world, even on the left, even in progressive movements, kindness is often seen as a sign of weakness. And overcoming that and really trying to feel what other people are feeling and know when you've pushed people as a leader. You asked me about leadership. Knowing when you've pushed people too hard is extraordinarily important. We need to get to young people. We need to say, these are the visions, the alternative visions that you're being given. This disinformation is taking you down a rabbit hole. It's a bad place for you to be. It's a dead end and it will hurt you. The problem is right now, if you live in the United States, it'll get you somewhere. You know, the more MAGA you are, the more likely you are to get a good job. I mean, they're purging the CIA and the FBI, looking for people who say, no, 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 we're on the MAGA. We're on the MAGA team. We're Team MAGA, and then they stay. But they are literally going through everybody who will not say that. So what we need to say to people is that will, as the Bible says, that this too shall pass. Trump and his time shall pass, and what will we build for when it's gone? And getting to young people who are feeling uneasy. I got 4 adult grandkids, young adult grandkids, and they are confused, and they know who I am and what I stand for and what their family stands for. But there's a wide open world out there, saying very different things, offering very different things.
That's an interesting point about the conflicting values and visions that are throughout social media, and how do young people discern which way to go and what values to, as you said earlier, where do you stand? You know, that importance of actually standing somewhere, I think, is very critical.
Standpoint, that was Ursula Frank. Isn't it a lovely phrase?
Yes, I loved her too.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. We miss her.
Oh, we miss her terribly. I just wanted to ask you, so and then we'll open it up, but you have worked on a variety of ecological issues. You've worked on gender issues. You've worked on a variety of eco-justice issues, social justice issues. You've worked in different roles in leadership. I mean, I'm very impressed with all the different roles you held. Director of the Office of Equal Opportunity for the Ottawa City Hall. At the same time, you're going around building blue communities. At the same time, you're doing analytic papers and providing alternatives. What roles have you found to be the most, not moment, but in all these roles and all this work? Let me phrase it differently. To me, all of these things connect. I don't think that is obvious to everyone else.
Yeah.
So my question is, how do you connect all these? Because to someone else, they might look different, but you see, I see them as all quite connected, and I'm pretty sure you do too. I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, of course, I wasn't doing those things consecutively or together. I was doing them consecutively. I became part of the women's movement in the 1970s and started a company called Women Associates Consulting Incorporated. And we went into, we did work at the CBC, putting women through leadership seminars. And I was the first woman to ever teach at the Canadian, the RCMP, where they teach police, the Canadian Police College. I would come in the morning and they would have put Playboy and Penthouse pinups behind me, and they'd all say, "Good morning, miss," and I'd say, "Oh, you spent your allowance all in one place," right? You know, it really, Heather, it really was a feeling. As I said earlier, there wasn't a path for the kind of life that I've led or the work that I've done. There's much clearer path for people like me, you and me now, but there wasn't then. And to a great extent, I just followed my instincts. I was an early feminist. I was angry at the treatment of women. Partly the earliest was the image of women in the media, and I hated that. And just what can I do about it? What can I do about it? And so I built a career as I went along, and I learned so much. I mean, it was just working at City Hall, the Office of Equal Opportunity for Women during the early 1980s was a riot. I mean, they had no employment manual. They had no employment rules. There were the French and the English, the Protestant and the Catholic, and it was your turn to hire somebody. Now it's your turn. Okay, my nephew wants to, right? Like, and I came in and I said, we need discipline if we're going to, if we're going to serve women, we're going to have to serve everybody. Rocking the boat, we brought the first women into firefighting, the first women into policing, the first women snow plow. They used to make the women stand out in the cold till they were just about frozen to teach them they shouldn't really be there. Like, it was wild. Sexual harassment like you wouldn't believe. So I learned on the job. But what I took that learning and built into the notion of the human rights. And when the free trade agreement came along, what we were worried about, what I was worried about at first, was not at all about water. I discovered water reading the annex at the end of the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement that named all of the goods that were now going to be subject to the trade rules. And there was water in all its forms, including ice and snow. That set me on that journey. But before that, I was worried about it because I thought we are going to be forced or potentially invaded economically in a way that it'll be hard to hold on to our social programs, our pensions, our healthcare. Under Ronald Reagan, it was a very, very different time. And Brian Mulroney was saying, we're open for business, come on up. He was inviting American service, health and everything up into Canada. So to me, to go from the women's movement, and I did serve, then I went on from there to serve, to be a senior advisor to Pierre Trudeau on women's issues, just for a year, because then he made his famous walk in the snow. But, and I have a funny story about that. I was his advisor on women's issues, but I was once introduced as his advisor on women's affairs. And I didn't realize there was a Globe and Mail reporter in the room. And so I got up to speak and I said, well, actually, I'm his advisor on women's issues. He looks after his affairs all by himself. And I looked down and I think, oh no, I'm going to learn not to do things like that. But to me, going from the women's movement to caring about what these free trade agreements, which basically take a lot of power away from governments and hand it to transnational corporations. And I will remind us that of the 100 leading economies in the world, 69 are corporations and 31 are countries. 69 are corporations and 31 are countries. Like, this happened as we said it would happen, and they would have tremendous power to set policy, to turn us away from real climate work, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, that was a natural thing. And then getting into the water issue was right back to the women's issue, because in the global south, it's women and their girl children they have to take out of school, that go spend 3, 4 hours, 5 hours walking to find water, have to find water to grow the crops, to feed the family, and so on. So it was back in a way to being very much a women's issue. So the issue of rights changes, though, and I think that's what I know we've got. I want to open it up to discussion, but the notion of rights, and we talked earlier about social justice, changes and matures. When I think about the human right to water, I'm much more leaning towards the notion of social rights, the rights on Indigenous people. The UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People basically talks about cultural rights, community rights, resource rights, historic and cultural rights, as opposed to those individual rights, which is very much more of a Western construct. So you change as the world changes in a good way. You learn, you help shape a new way of looking, or the next good way of looking at something, and you bring people along. And for me, there's just been, the books have helped. I write for people who want more information, the more depth, but we've always put out comic books and fact sheets and lots and lots of material out on the internet that's easy for people to access. And then for those who want to go deeper and have more information, you have that too. So providing as much information as you can, and then having some trust, and I'll stop here. But my definition of hope, when I came to the end of that book, I thought, okay, now Now I finally got my definition of hope. And my definition of hope is that hope is wise hope, because I borrowed a term from an American spiritual advisor, Joan Halifax, who works with men on death row. So she has something to say about hope, right? And she says, wise hope isn't, everything's fine, it's Pollyanna-ish, everything's good. No, you face the problem and you deal, you don't pretend it's not what it is, but you take action anyway. So for me, wise hope is seeing the world as it is, but reaching out to touch it in any way that you can to make a difference. And here's the important thing, Heather: having faith that others are doing the same thing or something similar. You won't know who they are. You can't possibly know what's happening, but you have to have faith that others care too, and others are seeing the same vision or a similar vision to yours. And each step that we take, each positive thing we do, is an antidote to the poison in the world.
Very good, very lovely, Maude. I'm going to, it is Bianca who facilitates the questions. Several questions have come in. Bianca, I'll turn it over to you. And
Sure.
then
Well, thank you. First of all, I wanted to thank you, Maud, for such an inspiring vision that you offered us today, and I really feel that we're standing on the shoulders of giants. After hearing you talking about the standpoint, and it's a more hopeful standpoint to be there. So I really appreciated your talk, and I will I will invite our guests to either put up your hand, like in under reactions at the bottom of your screen, or to send us your questions in the chat. So I will alternate. I will read a question from the chat and also allow you to speak if you want to address Maud directly. So I'll start with the first question from the chat from Kathleen. Can Maud tell us more about the book she's now working on?
Oh dear. I told you this is a problem, Heather and Bianca. Okay, it's called Earth for Sale, The Fight to Stop the Last Plunder of the Commons. And what it is, it's about the move as we are understanding the need to deal with biodiversity as well as the climate crisis, the move to save nature, because there's trillions of dollars being put out there by governments, by big NGOs like the Nature Conservancy, by the World Bank, and so on. But the big asset managers like BlackRock and the big banks and the big transnational corporations are all over it. And basically what they're saying is, move over, governments, you haven't done a good job, which is not untrue. We're taking over, and we will bring nature into the market where we will put a price on it, and we will then have it compete in the market for itself. In other words, we will say this forest is worth this, they call it ecosystem services. So this ecosystem service is worth X amount of money. They've actually put the price on a whale. A whale is worth $2 million. An elephant is worth $1.75 million. I'm not making this up. These are economists who have put UN and World Bank economists who put a price on wild animals because they are carbon sinks. And also they bring in dollars for ecosystem or ecotourism. And so they're worth this much. And the thinking is, well, if you can prove they're worth this much, then maybe people won't kill them. Well, yeah, but if you can prove that you're going to get more from killing them than not killing them because you put them in the marketplace, you've defeated it. And it's about carbon trading, carbon offsets, where you get to continue to pollute, but you grow some eucalyptus trees somewhere, or you continue to make to create bottled water. You're a big bottled water operator, and you take the spring water and you're taking all you want and making a ton of money, but you give some bottled water to some poor kids in a community in Africa. That's called offsetting. And then you're allowed to get credits, and you're allowed to trade the credits. And it's basically just making the whole fight around climate and environmental justice and fighting for a safe environment, much, much harder. I know the issue quite well on water, but I've been learning a lot about biodiversity offsets. There's plastic offsets. In other words, you can continue to make all the plastic you want, no rules, no regulations, as long as you do something somewhere else that you can say has somehow uh, made up for it. So I'm deep into it. I was grateful to have it when my ankle gave out, and I don't find hardly anybody knows it's happening. It's put off the fight for the climate for 10 years. It's just handed it over to the private sector, saying, "Don't worry, you don't have to touch capitalism. You don't have to touch the mainstream economy or mainstream economic thinking. We can continue to have unlimited growth because we're taking care of it. We're going to go in and save that park by making it a public-private partnership where we come in and determine what happens to it, and we'll protect it by making a profit from it, because there's no other reason for you to be in biodiversity finance if you're a private company." So it's a really, really, really interesting subject and book, and I'm fascinated with it. I'm learning as I'm going. Gloria Steinem says she writes what she needs to read, and I guess that's where I am right now. Thanks for asking.
Thank you so much, Maude, for this. It's really a heartbreaking topic to work on, but I think it's so important. I will see if is there anybody who would like to ask Maude a question directly. We have time for one more question.
I saw one from Joe
There is,
Gunn.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Please go ahead, Maude.
well, no, unless somebody wants to ask, but I saw my friend Joe Gunn is here. Earlier decades of opposition to free trade organized massive opposition. Today, politicians and some labor seem to be fighting to preserve open borders. Is economic nationalism a solution? Joe knows this very well because Joe was very much part of this when decades ago we set up a fabulous network called the Action Canada Network that brought in faith-based groups, labor movement, the environment, women's movement, social justice groups, and so on. And we came together to form an opposition to the economic globalization agenda. We lost the Canada-US free trade fight because the vote was split between two parties that were against, the NDP and the Liberals, even though the more people voted against it, but they split the vote. And then we lost NAFTA because Chrétien basically promised he wouldn't sign it without 6 basic changes and then didn't. I mean, he did sign, he didn't get the changes. But we went on to fight and stop this expansion to the free trade area of the Americas. We stopped one called the Multilateral Agreement on Investment, which would have given corporations of all the wealthy countries the right to sue governments, which we had in NAFTA, which is gone because we fought to get it out of the new trade agreement. So we built a movement, as Joe, as you well know, and our dear and good friend Tony Clark, or the late Tony Clark, was the chair of the Action Canada Network. That's what I meant earlier when I said that we came together and we made something that was greater than the sum of its parts. And I do believe we need to do that again, not nationalism in the sense of, we're better than anybody, not even better than the Americans. I have so many American friends who are just devastated for what's happening. Their hearts are hurt, right? But a form of security and self-reliance, working with for justice here in Canada and justice internationally. Yes, we need this, and I think we're beginning to see the building of that again, Joe. It's the divisions around so many things have been quite deep, and people have been in their silos, and pulling those people out of their silos to come together and say, it's not that your silo doesn't matter. It's just that your silo is going to be better addressed if you're with a big tent here and we all can work together. So thank you, Joe. I know you've been incredibly important part of that movement in your social justice work.
Thank you so much, Maude. I see, Mabel, that you have a question, but I'm really sorry we will have to wrap up since we can only be together until 1 today. So please feel free maybe to send us an email with your question for Maude. And I see many messages of thank you and of appreciation for your presence and inspiring conversation. And thank you very much, Heather, for inviting Maude. It has been such an honor to have you here. And I want to conclude by saying that our new graduate programs in leadership ecology and equity, and also the diplomas in diversity, equity, and inclusion are open for admissions. We will be hosting info sessions on February 27 and 28. Information will be sent to all of those who registered today. Please follow us on social media to stay updated with the webinar, workshops, and activities at our school and also at the Providence Institute of Transformative Leadership. And I would like to thank you to all of you who participated here for this amazing conversation that was so inspiring and so nurturing for my soul. So I really want to show our appreciation as a school to you, Maude and Heather, for this beautiful interview today. Thank you very much, everyone, and take good care.
Thank you. And just to remember what Banksy says, if you're tired, rest. Don't quit.
I just want to quickly say, Maude,
Wonderful.
I am in great admiration of all the work you've done and enormously grateful. You have changed the Canadian landscape. We all have a responsibility to do that, but today I'm just extremely honored to hear some of your work. It's been so important. It's been so important. And thank you, and such a noble soul. And that is also extremely meaningful. So lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.